It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change, that lives within the means available and works cooperatively against common threats. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. The world will not be inherited by the strongest. It will be inherited by those most able to change. The most important factor in survival is neither intelligence nor strength, but adaptability. It is not the biggest, the brightest, or the best that will survive, but those who adapt the quickest. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. Nothing exists for itself alone, but only in relation to other forms of life. Building a better mousetrap merely results in smarter mice. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time does not discover the value of life. I am dying by inches from not having anybody to talk to about insects. The more one thinks, the more one feels the hopeless immensity of man's ignorance. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. In the long history of humankind and animal kind, too, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. Everything in nature is the result of fixed laws. Man, wonderful man, must collapse into nature's cauldron. He is no deity, he is no exception. Man in his arrogance thinks himself a great work, worthy the interposition of a great deity, more humble, and I believe true to consider him created from animals. There is no fundamental difference between man and animals in their ability to feel pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. It is always advisable to perceive clearly our ignorance. A mathematician is a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat which isn't there. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. How paramount the future is to the present when one is surrounded by children. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Animals, whom we have made our slaves, we do not like to consider our equal. If I had my life to live over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. The normal food of man is vegetable. Multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. The school as a means of education to me was simply a blank. Much love, much trial, but what an utter desert is life without love. Nothing exists for itself alone, but only in relation to other forms of life. Nature will tell you a direct lie, if she can. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. Worms have played a more important part in the history of the world than humans would, at first, suppose. If the misery of the poor be caused, not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. Every new body of discovery is mathematical in form, because there is no other guidance we can have. I always make special notes about evidence that contradicts me, supportive evidence I can remember without trying. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the term of natural selection. At no time am I a quick thinker or writer. Whatever I have done in science has solely been by long pondering, patience, and industry. free will is to mind what chance is to matter. I have been speculating last night. What makes a man a discoverer of undiscovered things? As far as I can conjecture, the art consists in habitually searching for the causes and meaning of everything which occurs. The fact of evolution is the backbone of biology, and biology is thus in the peculiar position of being a science founded on an improved theory. Is it then a science or faith? Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds which follows from the advance of science. There is a grandeur in this view of life. From so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful are being evolved. Music was known and understood before words were spoken. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation, but the history of science shows that fortunately this power does not long endure. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. If everyone were cast in the same mold, there would be no such thing as beauty. The willing horse is always overworked. Blushing is the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. Endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. The most powerful natural species are those that adapt to environmental change without losing their fundamental identity, which gives them their competitive advantage. I am turned into a sort of machine for observing facts and grinding out conclusions. We can allow satellites, planets, suns, universe, nay whole systems of universes, to be governed by laws, but the smallest insect we wish to be created at once by special act. I was a young man with uninformed ideas. I threw out queries, suggestions, wondering all the time over everything, and to my astonishment the ideas took like wildfire. People made a religion of them. To suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. It is so easy to hide our ignorance under such expressions as the plan of creation or unity of design, etc., and to think that we give an explanation when we only restate a fact. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I, for one, must be content to remain an agnostic. We are not here concerned with hopes or fears, only with truth as far as our reason permits us to discover it. Wherever the European had trod, death seemed to pursue the aboriginal. In my simplicity, I remember wondering why every gentleman did not become an ornithologist. The most energetic workers I have encountered in my world travels are the vegetarian miners of Chile. It is mere rubbish thinking at present of origin of life. One might as well think of origin of matter.